Hi, my name is Pardeep Singh Negra. I'm the DEI and Human Rights Consultant and subject matter expert for the Journeys Through Prejudice project. I'm here to share some thoughts, reflections, and insights of the project. I'll probably want to start off with just sharing how we came about as a group to film the short that you've had a chance to possibly watch, and if you haven't, I would encourage you to watch it. It's a short film that chronicles the life of a migrant, a racialized migrant, here in Brampton in the region of Peel in Ontario. And it's set originally approximately 1972 and follows his journey for seeking employment and work. And when we had a chance to interview the actual subject person who the film was based on, Mr. Lalji, it was interesting, our conversations. We probably had about 7 hours worth of audio conversations to get a good feel of who he was and all the layers of experiences of racism and discrimination he faced, and the good, the bad, the ugly of his journey in seeking jobs, seeking employment, seeking stability, and just how he navigated some of the challenges that he faced, because it wasn't necessarily just in employment, but it was outside of that as well. And we had a chance to have some long and deep conversations, and that really helped us to get a better picture of how we wanted to, in a short film, be able to capture so many different nuances and moments of his journey. And so when we did do the final filming and editing, it's approximately 15 to 20 minutes short film. And we have audience members look through the film, and as part of their journey, they will review the film. And we start off by debriefing the film and asking individuals to take a look at and talk about what they seen, what they experienced, anything that resonated with them, anything that might have been triggering, or any connections as part of their own journey, some either metaphors or looking even at times similar experiences. And it was fascinating because one of the things we start off with is defining concepts of what we call microaggressions. For individuals, microaggressions are daily or occurrences that happen that might not overtly seem on the surface to be defined as racism or discrimination or even marginalization. And so once I've had a chance to share out what is a microaggression, and I've tried to use in facilitating our discussions with the audience, different points of how they can look through different parts of their identity and relate to concepts of microaggressions, because microaggressions are not unique or specific to just race or racism or racialized individuals. Microaggressions can occur based on gender, sexual orientation, being differently abled, on a number of different variables. And so once we asked audience members to reflect on the film and share some things that stood out, a number of them noticed some really unique particulars of the film that we try to demonstrate. And sometimes it's just an individual taking up space and thinking that they have the right to space, somebody's own personal space, as we call it. Sometimes it's just gestures, facial features. Sometimes it's just the movement, body movement, because we sometimes speak about expression. We sometimes say that you can smile with just your eyes. And so looking at all those different dimensions of body language, expressions, language, comments. And so we had a chance to explore the concept of microaggressions to really get everything started. It was interesting because we also had a survey as well. And we had a pre and a post survey to ask participants to first fill out a questionnaire prior to watching the short, and then afterwards following up with a post to see if there's any difference in terms of understanding, learning, or even change of perception. Quite often as Canadians, we don't have a chance to really take a step back from our busy everyday lives and really ask ourselves some very important questions, both on an individual level and a systemic level. We ask questions, is Canada racist? We ask questions like, are Canadians racist? And so it had a chance in, we even asked participants to share their thoughts around some of the questions, because sometimes they feel quite poignant, quite direct. But those things were important because, like I said, quite often we don't have a chance to take a step back and really put our thoughts and reflections and test those thoughts and values that we have or we hold dear, both as individuals or as a country, and really put those to a test. And so, for example, when we were exploring the concept of Canada as a country, we differentiated that in terms of, for those people that are in power or authority or make decisions on behalf of us as a country, on behalf of us as citizens, we're looking at what are those measures that we hold ourselves and our country to standards, and not only nationally, but on the international stage as well. And one of the things we talked about and explored was, for example, Canada and its position when the UN Declaration, so that's UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, when Canada had a chance to be a signatory on that declaration and document. And this was on the heels of all the exposure of what had happened here in Canada around the residential school system. And yet Canada was one of those countries that did not initially sign on to UNDRIP. And so those are ways that we look at ourselves as a country and test our values against the decisions our government is making on behalf of us. We also looked at these aspects of when we see ourselves as Canadians and fellow Canadians, what are some different thoughts and policies and circumstances that are going on? We know a live issue for us as Canadians right now is in Quebec, where public servants do not have the right, whether as a teacher, as a bus driver, as a police officer, really in any sphere of public service, as a public servant, have the right to have their articles of faith, for example, like myself, be wearing the turban as part of my job as a public servant, for which I serve here in Ontario as a public servant. And so we explored those aspects of what's happening in our own country right now, and how do we feel about some of these realities. And it wasn't just necessarily Quebec. We looked at a survey that was completed to ask fellow Canadians what they think about some of those decisions that Quebec had made. And it was unfortunate to see that over 25% of Canadians agreed. And so that's more than 1 in every 4 Canadians would think that that is something that's possibly appropriate in 2024. And so we were able to deconstruct and disrupt those kind of thoughts and processes and explore them and ask the impact, because sometimes it's not just about the intent, but it's the impact. And then exploring themes like, is there a concept of neutrality when you're looking at human rights and equity? And how does that play out? Is that such a thing? This concept of treating people fairly or equitably or equally, what does that look like? What does that feel like? And can you really say that we always treat everybody equally and fairly? And in fact, does that treatment in of itself lead to discrimination or prejudice? Because, for example, when we look at aspects and concepts around treating people differently to treat them equally, I think about people who are differently abled. And so their access to a building might not just be stairs. And so you have to treat them differently in one aspect in terms of what kind of access you're creating, for example, a ramp, in order to treat them equally, to give them equal access to a building or a place of service. And so we explored those kind of themes as well to look at those concepts of equality and equity, which is the provisions that you'll put into place to get to the area of equality. So we explored a number of different themes and looked at how those systemically manifest themselves. We looked at concepts of social capital and agency. We looked at concepts of stereotypes, of marginalization, and narratives from the Eurocentric lens itself, including worldviews. And all these different aspects help us get a better understanding of what does racism look like, what does discrimination look like, and where does it manifest? In fact, it manifests itself in every single social fabric of society. There's no special institution or place that you can go to think that you're going to be immune, for example, from sexism or racism. And so it's important to look at all those different dynamics and then explore how you would possibly recognize it, and even how you want to maybe disrupt it, or build some capacity and strength to be able to feel much more confident in order to challenge it or disrupt it, or even how you might even find other creative ways to address some circumstances. You know, in the film, Lalji had an opportunity to make a connection with his employer, who originally had denied him a job. And through conversations and some mutual connection, there became what you call a knowledge affinity. And so that kind of broke the ice. And so, but sometimes that's not always possible for individuals. So we explored those kind of concepts as well, that not every situation can be challenged or disrupted or handled the same way. A lot of different variables and factors play into those pieces, and those things are important. We also explored what you can do, where you can go to both seek resources and information, as well as seek support and advocacy. So there's a number of different things and areas and places and organizations and institutions, and it runs the whole gamut. You can start off within your own place, if it's a place of employment. A lot of organizations have positions such as diversity, equity, and inclusion officers or managers. They might have a human rights department, or they can go to human resources. You can speak to your local politicians, whether it may be a school board trustee, it may be a local councillor, it might be a member of provincial parliament, it may be a member of parliament. There's also community-based organizations and advocacy groups. We shared a number of different groups, for example, within the Jewish community, within the Muslim community, and the Sikh community, have various advocacy groups, community-based groups that look and try to address and support individuals or groups that are going through discrimination or racism or hate. And then we have provincial and federal institutions as well. We have the Ontario Human Rights Code, and we have the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms as well. And so we have the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and there's other clinics and legal aid clinics as well that help support individuals who may be going through situations and facing racism or discrimination. So we had a chance really to have some great, deep conversations and discussions to ask how things changed. Are things different? You know, the film explored a time where it was common and open for people to express their bigoted views or their racist views. And today you ask, you know, is there still, and how does it manifest itself, some of those views and positions? And so we had a chance to explore a lot of different themes when it comes to racism and discrimination and marginalization. We looked at building capacity and empowering individuals. We looked at what is social capital, what is agency, and what is the lack of social capital and agency. You know, when we looked at individuals, and I used myself and my community as a starting point, and we explored concepts like, when somebody looks at my identity, do I have the default of being Canadian? One of the examples I used was, you know, if we were to walk into any school and ask students in elementary to draw a picture of a Canadian, what's the possibility they will actually draw a picture of somebody who looks like me, somebody wearing a turban, and define them as a Canadian? Because Canadians do wear turban. I am Canadian and I wear a turban. And so Canadians do wear turbans. But is that the default? How about around pigmentation? If they were to draw a picture, would they draw somebody who identifies as a Black Canadian? And so even just the features that we have and that we hold as part of our identity, are those seen as Canadian? Is that what it means to be Canadian? And so those are some of the starting points, because otherwise, how are we viewed? How are we engaged publicly? And the lack of agency and social capital really manifests itself to other people, a whole group of people. And through othering, individuals get marginalized. And they're not seen, as Martin Luther King had said, for the true character of who they are as a people, but rather just valued, judged, stereotyped, and in fact discriminated based on just the color of their skin. So we had a chance to really look at a number of different areas of racism and discrimination and prejudice. as the title of the film. In fact, even the title of the film, as we were exploring it, we had many different discussions. We were even contemplating the title Canada, My Rose, because we often metaphorically, or I metaphorically usually speak about Canada, a beautiful country. I wouldn't want to be living anywhere else, but kind of like a rose. It's beautiful, but it has its thorns, and those thorns sometimes hurt. In fact, they can also sometimes make you bleed. And I can just share my own experience, not only just generally in public or in professional spaces, but even as an athlete trying to compete as a boxer in Canada, and the challenges and the difficulties I had, and the racism and discrimination I experienced and still do at times. And to the point of my life being threatened. I was attacked. And so you can see the manifestation of what happens when we think of somebody less than or an other, and we don't think that they are entitled to the same rights when we say all Canadians have a right to live free of discrimination, or even just the title of being defined as Canadian. When my son walks the streets of Peel or Ontario or any street in Canada, in fact, would you see him as a Canadian? And so these are the type of reflective questions we must continue to engage in as Canadians, and our role and responsibility to civic engagement. And I probably want to leave with one of our most important journeys as Canadians, and that is the journey and path of reconciliation. We have a responsibility to be able to first, we talk about the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and it has to start with the truth and the acceptance of the truth of our realities and our histories as Canadians. And that should be the benchmark for us to be able to say, what is our responsibility, understanding the past and taking stock of the past, and our responsibility going forward to make a better Canadian, a better Canada for all of us as Canadians. And so that path of reconciliation is a responsibility for all of us in our personal and professional lives. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for spending some time listening to our Journeys to Prejudice project, and how we carried out the project itself. So thank you very much. Take care.